confused, more clear, and we explored some of the aspects of vagueness and lack of clarity. Specifically, here they are, 4 sources of confusion: vagueness, ambiguity, excessive generality, and undefined terms. Now, we covered a bunch of different groups here. I think we left off right about here, and when we're talking about syntactic ambiguity. And these are sentences that are ambiguous because of the way they are structured. And in order to clarify the sentence, you're going to have to make the structure, reorganize it, so that you make the meaning clear. And in this particular case, we have this long sentence right here. What does it mean? To travel in Canada, you will need a birth certificate or a driver's license and other photo ID. Well, the meaning of that sentence is going to depend on how you group these parts. If you view it this way, then you'll need a birth certificate or a driver's license, and on both alternatives, you'll need a photo ID. But you could also interpret it this way. You'll need a birth certificate or a driver's license, and only if you use a driver's license will you then need a photo ID. So to clarify this sentence, you're going to have to either state it this way. You will need either a birth certificate or a driver's license, and you will also need an additional photo ID. Or you can state it this way. You will need either a birth certificate or both a driver's license and an additional photo ID. So the idea is that you're going to have to clear it up so that you know how to group these phrases in the sentence. Syntactic ambiguity has to do with the structure of the sentence. And usually you might not need to add a word, you'll just have to reorganize the parts of the sentence. Any questions about syntactic ambiguity? Somebody mentioned punctuation. Punctuation can be used to clarify syntactic ambiguity in many cases.
But I have a question. So if we do that, if we group them in different ways, do we have to group them so that we get all the different possible meanings, or?
Well, you have to pick one meaning,
Okay.
and you have to pick a way to structure it so that that meaning is distinguished from the other possibilities.
But if you get a sentence like that, an argument like that, how do you know which one is in?
You have to ask somebody. You won't know. You'll have to go to the boss and say, "What did you guys mean by this?" Good point.
They probably won't know either.
Yeah, and here we're dealing with the DMV, so you have to wait in line. That ain't gonna work. Go online to the website, see if you can get it. Now, another aspect of syntactic ambiguity, and this is a real problem, I believe, and that is clarifying our pronoun references. Consider this sentence. After their father removed the trash from the pool, the kids played in it.
In trash?
What are the at least 2 ways in which we can interpret this sentence? Yes, sir.
That after the father removed the trash, the kids played in the trash. And after he removed the trash, the kids played in the pool.
Correct. So here, the reference of this pronoun here, it, is going to be in question. What are we referring to here? Either the trash or the pool. And often we will use words and will not clarify the reference. It. What do we mean by it in the last part of that sentence? Paul agreed that once Gary removed the motor from the car, he could have it. What are the at least 2 interpretations that lay out there?
The motto on the cup.
What's that?
The motto on the cup.
Correct. The pronoun here could either refer to the motor or the car, and we're not being clear about what Gary can have by just calling it it. So we want to, easily to clarify this, you replace it with what you're talking about. They played in the pool, he can have the motor. This is often a problem as you're writing. It's clear to you because you know what you're referring to. But when you look at the sentence after the fact, often it won't be made clear to the reader what the pronoun is referring to. So syntactic ambiguity in this case is going to entail these ambiguous pronoun references. And the easiest way to clarify here is to simply replace the pronoun with exactly what you were referring to. All right, now another problem that leads to confusion when we write and when we argue for positions is when we're excessively general in the terms that we use. The less detail a claim provides, the more general it is. And excessive generality will undermine our ability to make our position clear because it's overly general. Consider this example from the book. Clarence has an arrest record. Well, that really doesn't give a whole lot of detail. You know, he could be a convicted murderer, or in this case, what if he was arrested during a protest against a company that was polluting in the river? And he's trying to work for an environmental defense firm. That would be a badge of honor. That kind of arrest record would not be a bad thing in certain cases. And so here, if you just say somebody has an arrest record and you don't clarify that in this case, you know, it was a protest for a peace rally or something like that, one would distinguish that kind of record from somebody who has a series of violent murders associated with selling drugs or something. So here, excessive generality in this first sentence would certainly hold Clarence back. A little more specificity would be helpful. A lot of people think that, you know, the war on terror is excessively general, and that this enables us to essentially start wars with everybody who disagrees with us. And a little more specificity might be helpful. Of course, that's a politically loaded determination. Some argue that these things are used to scare the public so that we can get you to allow us to pass the Patriot Act that'll allow us to look at your email, listen to your telephone calls. That's the argument here. Now, when we want to make our terms clear, often we will try to define them. And there are a number of purposes for defining our terms. First, we have lexical definitions that simply tell us what the word means. But in other cases, when we're writing an essay or something, we might use what we call a stipulative definition. And this describes the special meaning a word has in a particular context. For example, let's say you're writing a piece on computers or software, and when you refer to desktop, you are referring to the operating system. You're not referring to the desktop. And so you might stipulate in the course of this essay that when I use this term, I'm referring to this. So you would be adding specificity to a definition as appropriate within a particular context. Precising definition is similar to a stipulative definition. This is used to reduce generality, vagueness, and ambiguity. And for example, maybe you are writing an essay on investments, and when you refer to the term dollars, you'll be referring to Canadian dollars because you're talking about investments in Canada. This would add more specificity to a definition as appropriate for your specific essay. Rhetorical definitions, according to the authors, are going to get you into trouble. Rhetorical definitions are definitions that are really used to persuade others. And this will be an error in reasoning that we discuss later on down the road. The authors will say that rhetorical definitions should be avoided. For example, if somebody defines a conservative as a hypocrite, this example is from the book, by the A conservative is a hypocrite that thinks that the point of life is making money by ripping off the poor. Well, you are putting in your definition a politically loaded understanding of this concept. And you're trying to win the argument by defining the term in a particular way. Another example is if you define abortion as the murder of unborn children. Well, putting the term murder in that definition is going to load that definition to support those who might be in favor of a pro-life position. And so when you use the definition, you load it up in a way that helps you try to win the argument. That's what we call a rhetorical definition, and those need to be avoided. Any questions with the different purposes for definitions? So we got different purposes for definitions, and this, once again, is going to help us reduce the generality in our terminology and in our sentences so that we make our meaning more clear. But there are also different kinds of definitions. Different kinds of definitions. First, I'm doing this right now. One example of a definition would be an ostensive definition, and this is when you define something by example. When you define something by example. By Scripture, I mean the Bible or the Quran. So here you're defining what you mean by Scripture in terms of these examples, the Bible and the Quran. So ostensive definitions are definitions by example. A definition by synonym is providing another word or phrase that means essentially the same thing. So to be lubricious is to be slippery. And you're just coming up with another word that is synonymous with the one that you are defining. That would be definition by synonym. Analytic definitions come to us from philosophy, and they specify the features of a thing that a thing must possess in order for the term to be defined, the term being defined to apply to it. So, for example, how do we define a triangle? In geometry, a triangle is a three-sided figure. And this definition is going to apply to all triangles. And we'll actually say that it represents the necessary and sufficient conditions for being a triangle. And so if anything has these conditions, it will have to be a triangle. It's logically impossible for it not to be a triangle. So when we provide those necessary and sufficient conditions for something to, for that term to apply to something, then we're providing what we call an analytic definition. Generally, things are not defined in analytic terms. Any questions with the different kinds of definitions? Once again, ostensive, definition by example, definition by synonym, self-explanatory, and an analytic definition provides the necessary and sufficient conditions for a term to apply to something. Now, as I was mentioning before, rhetorical definitions that load the definition with one side of the argument, with the intuitions of one side of the argument, these need to be avoided. The authors of our text point out that definitions should enable people to find common ground so that an argument can be made. And so we don't want to define our terms in ways that are controversial. We want to define our terms in a way that are accepted by everybody. And that way our argument can do the work of leading us to a conclusion. If, however, you load your definitions with things that will be questioned by the other side, then you can argue you're weakening the power of your argument. So we should try to start with definitions that are commonly accepted.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am?
You know how before you said you can start an argument by pointing out the flaws in somebody else's argument?
Yes.
So could you start with a rhetorical argument on their side, and then...
By pointing out how they define terms in a rhetorical way? Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, just last night, Jon Stewart had a governor on, former Governor Mitch Daniels, and they were talking about how this term class warfare. And Mitch Daniels, oh, we need to get out of that terminology and stop using that terminology. And then when he began talking about President Obama, what he's doing recently, he said, well, President Obama is bashing rich people and loading the tax thing. And Stewart said, well, you just used the term bashing, and you said we're pounding on the rich. And those are all class warfare words. And he was questioning his use of terminology that would lead the argument in one direction. And it was a very interesting, it's funny, it went so long they had to cut it up. They couldn't fit it on the Daily Show. But your exact point. They were loading up terms on one side so the argument slants that direction. And Stewart is counting them off. Bash, where's that come from? He's just asking the rich to pay the same percentages as the poor. How's that bashing? You know? And you got to call them on it. You're exactly right. That can be a very effective way to critically analyze an argument. Look at how those terms are defined and see if you can find rhetorical definitions. Very good. So we don't want to prejudice the debate, because that would be what we call begging the question. When you load your argument with rhetorical definitions that serve the purposes of your own conclusion, then before the argument starts, you are in a sense begging the question on your side with these rhetorical definitions. And for example, defining abortion as the murder of an unborn child could be begging the question in the debate on abortion. You're loading your argument with rhetorical definitions that will lead people to a pro-life position. And that's an exact example of what you're talking about. You can critically analyze an argument and suggest that the argument begs the question by pointing out how rhetorical definitions are used to slant the argument in one direction rather than another. Yes, sir?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I got emergency.
What's that?
I got emergency. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No problem. No problem. No problem. So that would be begging the question, and we want to avoid that. Once again, begging the question is when you build rhetorical definitions into your argument that already slant the reader toward your conclusion. And that's going to be a fallacy that you're going to want to avoid. You want to not beg the question. Now, at the end of our chapter, they provide a helpful discussion of how to clarify your writing in terms of writing papers. And so rather than focusing on the clarity of phrases, words, or sentences, now we come to focus on a clear essay. How do we write a clear essay? And have you had to write a number of essays so far in your college career, everybody?
Yeah.
What's the longest paper you've had to write?
15.
15? 10?
10 pages.
10 pages. What was that for?
I believe that was for psychology.
Psychology.
Another one for English.
Well,
English argument.
I can tell you that learning how to write is intimately connected with learning how to think. And particularly in philosophy, that's why I tend to have essay tests, is that you really need to learn how to put things clearly in your own words for you to really understand them. And if you can't make your ideas clear in an essay, then you have no reason to assume that they're clear in your head. I had to struggle with this when I first got into philosophy. I came to philosophy from mathematics. I was an engineer for a while, and I was good in math, but I couldn't write very well. And so that was worse, because you think you're smart, but you can't make things clear. And I would write things down, and I'd get a B on it, and the professor would say, you know, you need to write better. You need to write more clearly. And I remember saying, oh, you know what I meant to say here, don't you? And this professor goes, well, Tim, this is exactly what you meant to say. And it was ungrammatical. I misspelled the guy's name, all this other stuff. And I began giving my papers to my girlfriend at the time, who was much smarter than I was. And it really dramatically improved my writing. And,
To do the papers or to edit the papers?
well, both. You know, just the thought that she was going to look at it and find stuff, it ticked me off, man. You know, and then she'd find things and it really ticked me off. And it motivated me to, so that I didn't have those things to find. And it was an extremely useful experience for me. In fact, we would also, when we gave presentations at conferences, she would sit in the audience, and if I said or you know, a lot of people say you know like 45 times in the span of 2 minutes, and she would count them. She would say I would say you know, and we would try to combat that, and she would be in the back 7, 8 times. And that, it was painful, but it was extremely useful because it really, over time, helped me clarify not only the way I write, but the way I speak. And clarifying how you put it in words is really clarifying how it is in your head. If you can't get it clear on a page, or if you can't explain it clearly to a class, you have no right to assume that it's clear up there. So learning how to write clearly, you could argue that it's really learning how to think clearly as well. Yes, sir?
I was just, this is maybe team's connection, but I was just thinking of an argument in my own mind that was, if, you know, we have this small fringe group in America that is the doomsday alarmists.
Mm-hmm.
Are convinced that rapture is sometime soon, maybe 2012, you know, maybe around the bend, maybe next March.
We're in the latter days.
Latter days. So, if doomsday is coming around the bend, and you know all the secular are damned and all the Christian are saved, then would they be supposing that we shouldn't do anything to make the world a better place until the rapture? Hypothetically, if the rapture is true, should we then stop attempting to improve the world, improve our condition?
You could argue.
Is that a valid question? Or?
I would say yes. And you know, let's be frank here. There are people who are putting canned goods down in the cellar because they think it's coming. And if you're doing that, are you going to be recycling and moving toward a more sustainable way of life if you think it's all going to come to end soon?
Or giving to charity, or to people who actually might need that food, you know? Absolutely.
So it affects the way we focus on what we're doing now. Yes, ma'am.
I just counted it out. That was one.
Yes, sir.
I think if that does happen, it'll be like a self-fulfilled prophecy.
Yeah.
Like, now that everyone's hyping it up, I think someone's going to be like, well, someone's got to shoot the first nuke. Like, it's already been hyped up, I might as well do it. Like Israel or something. Like, all right, let's push the button. They're expecting it anyways.
And it's
I agree.
It's all what you look for in the Bible. You can find passages in the Bible that say, go forth and flourish, and the Lord will never bring another flood again, and we should ensure life for the future. And also, on an individual level, when we think about euthanasia, usually Christianity is always going to be against ending your individual life early, even if you're facing great suffering. And they'll say it's never appropriate for somebody to consider ending their life, even if they have a terminal illness and they've got great pain in their future. So on an individual level, never ever think about ending early. But on a collective level, in some sects, you'll have groups who talk about the apocalypse as a good thing. It's a revelation.
It is a country.
We are enlightened. Can I have a hallelujah for the apocalypse? And they get one. And, yeah, it's coming. Yeah, absolutely. And it can scare you. I mean, I went by one place and raised the hair on the back of my neck listening to these people cheer at the prospect of the apocalypse.
Well, last semester I took 19th Century American Utopias, which was a lot of communal societies coming up, like for religious fanatics a lot of the time. Yeah. And in, I think, 1842 or something, there was another Great Disappointment, where he said the world was going to end and everyone got really excited. And some people were driven crazy afterwards because it didn't end.
Happen.
And they were so ready for it to happen.
1842?
I think so.
Did life suck then, or what? Like, why is everyone looking forward to that?
It's all relative.
They just thought, you know, they were going to be raptured or whatever.
They thought they were going to be beamed up by Scotty.
Yeah.
I'm gonna smoke cigarettes until 2012, and if the world doesn't end, I'm gonna stop.
Right,
It's
messed
funny
up.
what you were
It
saying.
gives me an excuse to do a lot of stuff. My
About people
whenever
who
like
aren't
my mom
doing
yells at me,
anything, you know, good
oh, I have like 6
people.
months left.
Because some people believe that if you did go out and do good,
Yeah, I got 6 months.
you're
Yeah.
gonna go to heaven.
Right.
And some people just kind of, they, you know, stopped doing anything. They just went into their own society.
There's
Oh,
a
that's a whole
particular
different-
brand of born
Oh
again
yeah,
who
we
will
got
be
all the
preaching here
end of
today.
2012, yeah.
Who
Down there in the...
yeah, well, they'll be here today, but they believe that good works are not enough. You have to drink the Kool-Aid as well. You have to agree with everything they say.
Love
Just
Who got us on the doomsday trail? Was it you, Gerd, that told
it was my fault. But
yes, ma'am.
I think Jesus said that we shouldn't worry about that. We should live peacefully and do the right thing.
Yes.
Get married, get children, live normal life,
Yeah.
and just wait for that day to come.
Yeah.
Whether you care about it and you don't care about it, it will come
it wouldn't
anyway.
affect how we should still try to make the world
Even
a better
if it
place.
doesn't come today,
Until
thank
the
you,
bitter
but you
end.
may die in one day. So what the heck?
Absolutely. But I will say, for example, in Utah, excuse me, you guys, in Utah, when I lived there, this is at a time when we have world population problems, you know. We have over 6 billion people on the planet now. 3 people are added to the world population each second. This is a real issue. And while I'm in Utah, they say that we should have large families. And there's these pamphlets that they hand out encouraging people to have large families. And it does seem like they're more focused on what's going on right now, perhaps, and not thinking about the long-term consequences of what they're advocating. And maybe if you think it's coming to an end in the future, you're not so worried about creating a sustainable way of life that will sustain us through the next century. Yes?
I think part of the danger with this postmodern literalism in Scripture is that we have a past tense instead of a future tense. We're not looking toward the future. I was just thinking, well, if you have Noah's Ark as an example for all people who follow the Old Testament, or the Old Book, God saved all the animals 2 by 2. Shouldn't then Christians be going, and Jews also be going out to save the animals of the world, the biodiversity?
They weren't
So
told
2
to.
by 2 can survive.
They actually have scientists that are saving the genetic material of different species in the hope of, if they do go extinct, we can regenerate that species.
Is that the Archive Project?
I think it is.
ARKIVE, Archive, yeah.
That's what some people think the Noah's Ark was just like a big genetic data bank. Actually, there's like a huge backstory to it, but it makes a lot of sense. It makes more sense than a big boat.
Well, we'll have to outline that in a clear essay here.
There's a seed bank now.
Yes.
I think something about depopulation, maybe. I think it was. I don't think anyone did. I think it just popped in my head. But I was watching, Henry Kissinger. I was watching a PBS interview, and like I didn't even look it up. I was watching it. Like I saw it with my own eyes. Like I was sitting there watching it. They asked him about overpopulation, and it was like, I want in my grandchild's life to see the world come from an uncomfortable 7 billion to a comfortable 1 billion in his grandchild's life.
How does that happen?
Yeah, it doesn't happen peacefully. You don't
Yeah.
happen- yeah.
Economic catastrophe, ecological disasters.
Disease.
How's
It's
that gonna
not
be comfortable?
because
Comfortable,
we
like,
all-
I
What's
don't
going to
know.
be comfortable about all
Like
that?
I think some people in India are uncomfortable because it's like really packed there, but like
Well, let's return to our topic here. We're thinking about how to structure a clear essay. And this will be important for you to get some good grades on these papers you have to write in college. I can tell you, having to have read a number of these papers, that most all of us can improve on the clarity of our writing and our thinking. And so keeping these ideas in mind can really help not only the way you write, but the way you think about things. So 4 parts of a good argumentative essay. First, is going to be a statement of the issue that you are trying to address. If you just start talking and you go on, and neat thing here, neat thing there, neat thing there, if the reader doesn't know what you're trying to accomplish, the reader is going to lose the desire to continue reading. You need to state an issue that focuses the discussion and helps the reader know where things are going. And so you're going to have an introductory paragraph. Usually you're going to try to excite the reader about this issue and clarify the issue that you're going to try to address. So, you don't just state an issue, but you explain it in a way that gives the reader a reason to want to learn more about it. This is why this is important. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. And you'll usually, have a statement of a thesis where you'll explain how you're going to address that issue as well. Statement of one's position. That's usually outlined in your thesis. And then the argument is going to support one's position. And after you state that thesis, the next paragraphs are going to develop your argument. And generally, there should be some rational progression to that argument. There should be some reason why you discuss the first part of the argument first, because maybe that first part is needed for the second parts of the argument to be understood. Rebuttals of arguments that support contrary positions. This shows that you understand the issue broadly and you have considered opposing views. If you only develop an argument for your position, one could question whether you've adequately considered all of the alternatives. So after laying out your argument and what you think is right, in order to have an effective argumentative essay, you really need to consider the opposing views, the opposing arguments, and try to provide some reasons why your position is superior than the others. So 4 parts of a good argumentative essay. Any questions about these? Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. First thing we ought to keep in mind, and they have a number of issues here to think about, focus. If you state that thesis, this is what I'm going to address. But then as you develop your argument, we go like we do in this class. We find ourselves talking about the end of the world, and then this over here, and then this over there. And it's kind of like a random journey, things I found on my walk today. That should not be how it appears to the reader. We need to be focused. And each step needs to make sense in terms of that focus. And if we get too far over here, that's what you call editing. Cut that out. Keep it focused. Keep it tight. Stay on message. Stick to the issue. Arrange the command. I've already given this presentation in my head, but obviously arrange the components in a logical sequence in a way that makes sense so that they don't appear random. And be complete. If there's an important part of the issue that others address in detail because of its importance, and you don't talk about it at all, then that could be perceived as a gaping hole in your argument. You didn't consider the blank fallacy. Why didn't you discuss that? My goodness. So you need to be complete as much as you can in the 5 or 10 pages of the essay. Questions, comments? Excellent. Claire? Yes, ma'am?
Are we going to write essays in this class?
What's that?
Are we going to write essays in this class?
No, I don't think we have a research paper in this class. But all of our examinations are going to be essay-based. So you will be writing on all of the tests, and these kind of points will help you be clear in your answers to the questions. Yes?
Say we perhaps have a take-home short essay for extra credit?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you want to do something like that, I'll definitely consider it for extra credit.
I know you asked us to form groups and write an essay about a presentation about
you don't need to turn that in as a written document, but you're right. Many people will write it out in advance, and that would be considered an essay of sorts. And these principles would certainly apply to it, absolutely. But just to refresh our memory on that presentation, what we're talking about is just a 10-minute presentation in front of the class where you explain an argument from popular culture or from the news, and you break down the argument, explain its components, and then you critically evaluate it. Maybe you agree or somebody disagrees with it. And so, but that would be a good example of making your writing clear. Although I won't expect you to turn in a written document for that presentation. But good point. Good point. Okay. When we're writing these essays, we definitely want to avoid some things. You want to avoid a windy preamble. You want to avoid a windy anything. And this is where you're, well, when history began. You got to focus, man. You know, start on the issue. Don't begin with the beginning of time and work your way up. You really need to begin at the issue and make everything right on point. If you begin talking about the irrelevant, you know what it seems like? You don't really know the issue, and you're just spending a couple pages talking about this other stuff to use up space. So you really want to stick on the point and don't wander off the point. Yes, sir.
I think, I mean, when I edit numbers, I always try to cut any verbosity out, any excess verbosity. And brevity is I guess, key to make a paper readable.
Absolutely. It moves along. The paper moves along. Stream of consciousness ramble. You know, yesterday I was thinking blah, blah, blah. Yeah. No, keep it focused. Don't make it appear as if this is random thoughts coming to a person. Make it appear as if there's a logical development to the argument and you've thought about it, why this goes first and that goes second.
Excuse me. For the first one, when we start to write an essay, we have to write first the general statement. Is it different from what you're talking about here?
Yes. General statement of the issue, you know, so you start on the issue. A windy preamble would start with the beginning of history and work up to the issue, you know. So, so long as you start with that issue, even if it's stated in general terms, at least you're starting at the issue and you're not wandering off topic. That's what we're talking about in terms of a windy preamble. Knee-jerk reaction. Knee-jerk reaction. You explain an example, and then we all have an instant, oh, that person should be put to death. That's a terrible crime. We want to avoid knee-jerk reactions in our essays. We want to make our reaction seem more thoughtful, more reasoned. And you don't want to pull on the instinctive chain of everybody and get them to, oh, let's put them to death or something. You, in this essay, want to make your responses more rational, more logical, more based on argument than instinctive reactions. In fact, sometimes knee-jerk reactions might be what are expected, and they might be rhetorically more effective. Before most of you were born, there was this election in 1988 between George Herbert Bush, George W.'s father, and this governor from Massachusetts, I believe, named Dukakis. And Governor Dukakis was opposed to the death penalty. And this one, during this one debate, a reporter, I think his name was Bernard Shaw, asked this question, which became famous and might have led to Dukakis' defeat. Bernard Shaw asked, if your wife was raped and murdered by this person, and this person was convicted of the crime, would you support putting that person to death? And Governor Dukakis having dealt with this issue many, many times, responded like a politician and said, no, Bernard, what we know in the state of Massachusetts is that the death penalty does not provide added deterrent, and so we would like, of course, and for the audience, it really felt like wrong. And this guy doesn't care about his wife. Seriously. And a lot of people said, you know, I don't want that guy as my president. I want somebody who feels something. Maybe somebody who feels a bit of a knee-jerk reaction. And a few years later, the former governor of New York, Cuomo, who is also a Democrat, but who had also seen Dukakis's failure in the 1988 election, and this Cuomo was interviewed, and he might have been thinking about the presidency himself, and he was asked the same question, and his response was different. He goes, you know, if your wife was raped and murdered, would you want the person to be put to death? And his response was this: well, my initial response is I'd like 5 minutes in a room alone with the guy. Because, you know, it's my wife. But my more reasoned response to this is that the death penalty really does not serve justice. Life in prison is going to be a terrible punishment for this person. And it's one that we can always correct if we happen to be wrong. So, although my initial response is I'd want 5 minutes alone with the guy, my more reasoned answer is that we follow the laws of the land. Now, I believe that Cuomo's answer was informed by a political strategy. He knew that the wah answer does not get you elected. And so he felt that you got to give a bit of a knee-jerk reaction in order for people to feel that you have a thing called a beating heart and that pumps red blood. But after you give that initial knee-jerk reaction, you have to provide a more reasoned response to the question. That's at least how Cuomo handled it. Now, Governor Perry might have a different approach. The recent debates providing evidence thereof. But here, my long, windy preamble here intended to show how a knee-jerk reaction in an essay, responding like Cuomo does in, I'd like 5 minutes alone with the guy. Don't conclude with that. Yeah, that's not the kind of reasoning we want in a good argumentative essay. We want the more reasoned response, if possible. A glancing blow. Glancing blow is where you're trying to chip away at the opposing position, but you really don't address the central issue. And you just kind of say something negative about the opposing side to undermine the support for that side, but it really doesn't contribute to addressing the central issue. And so a glancing blow is going to be off target, and it's really not going to have the impact that you would want to have in your argument. You want to make sure that your argument addresses that central issue in question, and bringing up things about, you know, the person's past or things that don't relate to the issue at hand, that's going to be thought as not being directly relevant to the argument at hand. Let the reader do the work. Here, in many cases, you're going to lay out the argument, and you're going to, you know, essentially allow the reader to put the pieces together. And you're not going to spell it out in a way that, you know, forces the reader to come to this conclusion or to that conclusion. You can lay out the facts for the reader and let the reader draw the conclusion themselves. And often that'll be a more effective way to develop an argument. You might begin the argument with a kind of open mind. And rather than having it already decided in your writing, begin the argument with an open mind and allow the reader along with yourself, to come to the conclusion. And you don't have to have a heavy hand that forces the reader to see it this way or that way. Definitely want to avoid discriminatory language. And there can be times in which this might be a little difficult. We, for example, want to avoid using masculine pronouns as gender neutral. And so somebody comes into the room, I wonder what he wants. Well, we're assuming that that person is a he. If somebody comes in the room, what would he or she want? You want to make sure that you don't, for a long time we assumed that the masculine pronoun was gender neutral. All men are created equal. And we were assuming that people understood that men refers to all human beings. Well, now we're not so comfortable with that kind of language. We want to use the term human beings instead of man. And when the reference of a specific pronoun is general, we don't want to use the masculine as gender neutral. We wanted to avoid being discriminatory. And certainly language that would be offensive to other cultures, if you use that language, it'll undermine the power of your argument when these other people from these other cultures read it. So the less offensive you can make your language, the more powerful your argument will be. Any questions?